Hello, guys. Can you believe me that I'm 32? I already fucked it up. Can you believe me? Yeah. What do you think is the worst? I just that was that was so unnecessary. Guys, I'm 31 years old. Can you believe it? With my skin glowing like this and my amazing complexion, you wouldn't think I was a day over 24, 25. It's my last day of the month. After this, I'm sad to say that just normal birthdays, normal birthdays till that big 200, and that's I'm gonna break all barriers. I'm gonna be the world's oldest person. Um. Okay, no. I haven't been on here in a while. Um, but I sat down today after my birthday, my week-long birthday celebration, and well, to say the least, I'm ready. I'm ready to. Who the fuck is this? I'm ready to get down to business. Okay. Do you also see that really important and interesting thing on the other screen? I hope you did, because it changes everything. The whole context of today's talk, it's different now. Ugh. Ugh. Um, I guess we just go. We just go for a few hours. This is Pedagogy of the Oppressed. We're back. Um, talking about how to apply ourselves. We're talking about, as oppressed people, how to apply ourselves in such a way that encourages learning. Um, and inverts the psychological duress imposed upon oppressed people by things like the mark of the plural, or by um, total control over the means of violence and total control over the means of creating image. How do you resist that? How do you humanize life that is so dehumanizing? And how do you maintain such a movement knowing that you'll only ever communicate images yourself as you resist images, until you seize the means of creating images and then are exactly what you were resisting. um Fascinating, fascinating topic with some pretty clearly attainable goals. We just want to improve in academia is all. We just want to legitimate what we know by changing academic coding and recognizing the work of people that has long contributed to our understanding of the world, um, but rarely to our understanding of how it's produced. So let's just move forward. Oh, I got a pretty good birthday gift. Check it out. $200. Sure hope no one beats me up for it. I don't know what to do with that, but it's there. Anyways, let's get into it. Making real oppression more oppressive still by adding it to the realization of oppression corresponds to the dialectical relationship between the subjective and the objective. Only in this interdependence is an authentic praxis possible, without which it is impossible. to resolve the oppressor-oppressed contradiction. To achieve this goal, the oppressed must confront reality critically, simultaneously objectifying and acting upon that reality. A mere perception of reality not followed by this critical intervention will not lead to a transformation of objective reality, precisely because it is not a true perception. This is the case of a purely subjectivist perception by someone who forsakes objective reality and creates a false substitute. It's well known that in settler colonial societies, societies that come from histories of settler colonialism and uh what is it, embody and manifest their structures in seats of power and reproduce mythopoeia to the effect of inspiring action for very little than one's desire to act upon a story. Um, Living in this world, it's important to be able to reason about what's around you, especially in academia, because many people have internalized it themselves amidst this like constant sort of appraisal and approval of one's moral character, of one's achievements, of one's standing in society, and of one's like future, especially. Um, you're taking all of that, and now you have to go through it knowing that like people are like conspiring against you, or that people are going to fail to uphold their ends of like promises to you or whatever, or like um that like very simple like everyday things that you kind of expect to happen, like emotionally. Maybe you expect to experience something from like a greeting, or like from like remembering something happens or whatever, and you kind of expect this to fit into like this sort of like emotional like reinforcement that you've like learned. Like just take that all away, and also make it so that no one explains himself, and you're talking about why it's so important to put someone who has no clue what they're doing out in the front like that. um Settler colonialism manages to be such effective remote power because it relies on a chain of succession. It relies on militarism, um, rather than any sort of like adequate compensation or understanding of one's like desires much further beyond like wanting to like live under like the powers that be. um it's an inefficient society that constantly demands that essential ideas used to build that society become reiterated in a vacuum of any reason uh, for those ideas to erupt, other than like uh, the sheer forcing of those ideas, um, usually to some like dubious ethical effect that affects um, colonized people before affecting non-colonized people, at least like in like the tax bracket kind of sense. If you're talking to people who don't know what their real role is, or don't know like what's persuading them necessarily, or like someone who can't be like their own leader, like a self-starter or something, like you're gonna have a hard time talking to them as like a rational person from society. And so it's like, as someone who's like a part of this on a global scale, um I came up this way, like constantly like criticizing things. I think it turns on something in your brain, um I think it makes it more rational to talk most of the time than anything else. And it definitely keeps conversations going. Of course, fat, ugly people want to stop you from doing that, so they put muscles to get even fatter underneath the fat, um, and then they threaten to hurt you if you like say anything that seriously challenges like what's going on in the room, because they expect to get sex out of it. They expect to get some kind of reward. That's literally all it is. Um, they're just told time and time again, doesn't matter if violence exists, these people are gonna be violent because they're gonna be told over and over again that they need to be like the vanguards of these ideas that don't like stop anyone from attacking like their own allies or themselves. So you know, it's kind of a dubious situation. um this is just like one of those things where it's like you just kind of have to hold tight. um but I think its inclusion in this book is like pretty noteworthy because I very rarely see someone like legitimately like put that into words, especially in the context of like anything remotely relating to epistemology, because it's usually, oh my god. I'm back. All right. Anyways, it's really important. This is the concern of many moral philosophers today, is how do you keep people going through a conflict where we're fighting like intellectually on terms that are completely unfair. Like if your opponent studies human behavior and psychology constantly, um and then puts that information into action by creating the commodities and like affecting the availability of like spaces and services in like a given place to reproduce their desired results, you must believe that at some point that like you're kind of coming from nothing. But it's from this point that people should be able to feel like confident in themselves enough to like make a stand, and to put their feet in the ground and stop accepting less, um and really change their personality to be someone who doesn't get pushed back so easily by this emotional adversity, who can fully rationalize like what it is that keeps them alive without dipping into like uh some simple myth, any sort of like spiritualism or like philosophical mumbo jumbo that like doesn't make any sense out of context. um and then you just hope that the pseudoscience is like more on the side of being a mistake than on the side of being like completely wrong about what's going on, if that makes sense. Like you want people to understand what's happening, maybe give them a lot of leeway on like how these things interact, right? Like just to be like reasonable in this very moment. But like it's ridiculous. It's ultimately very ridiculous. It's a Herculean task to get people to form a consensus today, especially any sort of consensus that could lead to a serious restructuring of institutions and society uh, that contribute to the permissibility of one's learning and one's ability to like carry knowledge within them without representing like some kind of like co-opting by like um advance economic forces that uh you know, basically want to legally seize land, despite all the pushback, despite everyone telling them no. It's still like their desire to like be like land barons and to deny people basic human rights. um but I mean, it's like you have to realize it. You have to realize a lot of this stuff on your own. um which is why it's so important to guard this part of the learning process. um Man, like I hate iPads so badly. I hate them so much for this. Like anything that just like takes people like away from their senses and like into this like touch duty dada fucking baby binky bullshit computing world is just like um it's just horrible. It gets people to stop thinking critically about um like the like substance of decisions, and more critical about like the absence of like obvious choices, which is really scary, right? When you have like hundreds of years of science based on like um an entirely bad faith understanding of like humanity, according to like really fucked up pseudoscience that like tries to say that like um certain traits are undesirable for society, and that there's this like impending like overpopulation event that needs to be like addressed, and that like genocide is like justifiable. Like you have like hundreds of years of science and like study, philosophy, religion like based on this just laying around, and you have more people complaining about the presence of options before the substance of options, um which is just like the softest it's ever been, really. um Used car salesmen thrive in an environment like this. It's kind of ridiculous. So it's important to be able to synthesize this sort of information, at least in like some like basic, almost like elemental form, where it's like literally just like negative stimuli, critical engagement, negative stimuli, critical engagement, because it's like that's that's what it's gonna be. That's what people are gonna keep pushing, and it requires a certain amount of maturity to continue to apply it. Um, yeah, no, it's never been easy, and it's not getting easier. Uh, a different type of false perception occurs when a change in objective reality would threaten the individual or class interests of the perceiver. In the first instance, there is no critical intervention in reality because that reality is fictitious. There is none in the second instance because intervention would contradict the class interests of the perceiver. In the latter case, the tendency of the perceiver is to behave neurotically. Damn. The fact exists, but both the fact and what may result from it may be prejudicial to the person. Thus, it becomes necessary not precisely to deny the fact, but to see it differently. This rationalization as a defense mechanism coincides in the end with subjectivism. The fact which is not denied but whose truths are rationalized loses its objective base, ceases to be concrete, and becomes a myth created in defense of the class of the perceiver. Herein lies one of the reasons for the prohibitions and difficulties to be discussed at length in Chapter 4, designed to dissuade the people from critical intervention in reality. The oppressor knows full well that this intervention would not be to his interest. What is to his interest is for the people to continue in a state of submersion, impotent in the face of oppressive reality. Of relevance, here is Lukács' warning to the Revolutionary Party. Il doit pas employer les mots de Marx. I don't know. I do not know how to pronounce that. In affirming this necessity, Lukács is unquestionably posing the problem of critical intervention. To explain to the masses their own action is to clarify and illuminate that action, both regarding its relationship to the objective facts by which it is prompted and regarding its purposes. The more the people unveil the challenging reality which is to be the object of their transforming action, the more critically they enter that reality. The more people unveil this challenging reality which is to be the object of the transforming action, the more critically they enter that reality. In this way, they are consciously activating the subsequent development of their experiences. There would be no human action if there were no human reality, no world to be the not I of the person and to challenge them. Just as there would be no human action if humankind were not a project, if he or she were not able to transcend himself or herself, if one were not able to perceive reality and understand it in order to transform it. Do you imagine talking to people? Oh shit. I feel like this is something I've already touched on. When it comes to like that idea that people stop talking when they feel like they're going to be replaced. I think it's like if you think of like a smart person and someone who like should know what they're talking about and like should be fully enabled to like teach someone about what they talk about or whatever, uh and you put the question to them, just thinking like empathetically for a moment, you have to wonder like is this person like worried about being replaced? Like job scarcity is a very commonly addressed issue in America. Do you think this person is like worried about being replaced if they end up like teaching someone like everything they know? Um and I think what you'll find is that there's like there's like a gap. Um and I think it's somewhat related to like the lying gap. There was this paper that they published a few years ago where it was like they were measuring people in a technological field, um and they were testing them to see how often they would lie to their own benefit or like to their own perceived benefit. And it was like there was like very very like untechnical sort of like entry level workers here who were like all being very honest. Then there's like this middle like thick ass puck, like I think it was something like 90%, some ridiculous number, um of people who were lying for their own benefit, and were caught in the lie, obviously. um but it's like a very, I mean, the test was designed so that they'd know like when they were getting caught in the lie. um and then like you have like the very like high skill, they'd say like high intelligence jobs or whatever. um and these people lied very little, very very little lying the more you go up the racket. um which, to a person like me is just more incentive to like be an altruist and to just put myself forward for some company somewhere. But ignoring that, I mean, like, could you imagine if like you had this conversation with someone every day, just like, hey, are you gonna teach? Are you gonna tell people like how you do things, like the way that you do? And then they go, oh well, no, no, it's not in my benefit today. And it's just, there's this world that technically exists where everyone can just cooperate. They just decide out of the blue, just randomly, like, I actually feel really cooperative right now, and I'm just gonna do exactly what you said. And that's great, right? Because we want to offset some of the costs we incur as a society, um by virtue of being like a capitalist society, right? And like being involved in this like monetary system, right? Because the idea is that every time you have a highly skilled worker going to work and doing all these things, maybe under an NDA or maybe with like proprietary knowledge or something, you're basically saying like this is like all of, like the time and knowledge that's never gonna benefit like the rest of society. It can have all this utility for the rest of society, and you're saying that's never coming back. Um, and and if you just like had this conversation with everyone one day, and it just said people just said, yeah, you know what? I think I'll just like teach a bunch of people how to do like these like really secret like high tech techniques and just like basically revolutionary, revolutionary, basically revolutionize like every scientific field in a day by having a conversation. Like that would obviously be very good for society, right? But it's probably not gonna happen because a lot of those conversations have to do with like I don't know, like the way people can like harm each other, or like I don't know, like some other dumb shit. It's entwined. Sorry, I have a stomach ache. Right. Becomes entwined, intertwined, entwined in someone's cash flow. Violence becomes entwined in someone's cash. Jesus. Okay. Um, I'm back. Okay. Yeah. I just, why don't people do things when it comes to teletropic measures and these like society level like attempts to change behavior? It's, well, part of it's fear, part of it's lack of engagement. So let's just spit in the face of either of those things and engage with it critically and honestly. Um, it's definitely that definitely made it into my life. That is like straight from like a mid to late '90s attempt to reclaim the American public from itself. Um, Enough messing with that. All right. In dialectical thought, world and action are intimately interdependent. But action is human only when it is not merely an occupation, but also preoccupation. That is, when it is not dichotomized from reflection. Reflection, which is essential to action, is implicit in Lukács' requirement of explaining to the masses their own actions, just as it is implicit in the purpose he attributes to this explanation, that of consciously activating the subsequent development of experience. Yeah, French people are always talking about this. Um, for us, however, the requirement is not seen in terms of explaining to, but rather dialoguing with the people about their actions. In any event, no reality transforms itself, and the duty which Lukács ascribed to the Revolutionary Party of explaining to the masses their own actions coincides with our affirmation of the need for the critical intervention of the people in reality through the praxis. The pedagogy of the oppressed, which is the pedagogy of people engaged in the fight for their own liberation, has its roots here. And those who recognize or begin to recognize themselves as oppressed must be among the developers of this pedagogy. No pedagogy which is truly liberating can remain distant from the oppressed by treating them as unfortunates and by presenting them for their emulation models from among the oppressors. The oppressor must be their own example in the struggle for their redemption. Okay. What? What did he just say? Hold on. Rich people have to do this for themselves? Are you telling me that there are many different types of rich people and that some of them are interested in others of them in like a weird way? What the fuck? What the fuck? That's crazy. Give me $200. Um, all right, maybe not that last part. Uh, the pedagogy of the oppressed, animated by authentic humanist, not humanitarian generosity, presents itself as a pedagogy of humankind. Pedagogy which begins with the egoistic interests of the oppressors and makes of the oppressed the objects of its humanitarianism, itself maintains and embodies oppression. What? Oh, which begins. Pedagogy which begins with the egoistic interests of the oppressors and makes the oppressed the object of its humanitarianism, itself maintains and embodies oppression. It is an instrument of dehumanization. This is why, as we affirmed earlier, the pedagogy of the oppressed cannot be developed or practiced by the oppressors. It would be a contradiction in terms if oppressors not only defended but actually implemented a liberating education. But if the implementation of a liberating education requires political power and the oppressed have none, then how is it possible to carry out the pedagogy of the oppressed prior to the revolution? This is a question of the greatest importance, the reply to which is at least tentatively outlined in Chapter 4. One aspect of the reply is to be found in the distinction between systematic education, which can only be changed by political power, and educational projects, which should be carried out with the oppressed in the process of organizing them. Okay. 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 I think when we consider like oppression as like a structural thing that's like ongoing, right? In explaining the oppressors and the oppressed, sort of like how we did with the colonized and the colonizer, we're gonna find that there's an oppressed oppressor and an oppressing oppressed, like a colonized colonizer and a colonizing colonist, like a post-colonial sort of mistake. This is gonna be very common. It's going to be very, very common as long as people are unable to affect history and effectively understand history. As long as people are, over the course of their life, entranced by some individualistic narrative about how they can contribute to labor or education during this division of labor or education, any sort of result of that throws someone off their life course. You know, they were gonna wake up one day and I guess start planting potatoes in the backyard. They were gonna do something based on their surroundings. Maybe they'd be at City Hall or something. Well, they're doing something else now, you know, and their life has been completely changed in this way. No one just completely changes anyone's lives. I mean, we're constantly asked to scrutinize these promises for power, these promises for relief, or whatever it is. And so it's really hard to legitimate yourself as someone who can change someone's life like that without being like the oppressor here, without being the colonizer here, the colonizing nation, or the entity, the oppressive entity, like whatever it is, like legal entity. And so like it really doesn't matter, or it shouldn't matter, that we talk about the exclusion of the oppressor here, because we're talking about something that happens like moment by moment, where like we start to see hegemony lose its efficacy, hegemony loses power and recognizability, and hegemony stops to stand the test of time. And more dynamic power structures resulting from this and being recognized, which should be fine. Sorry, my dog's Okay, I'm back. Dog was going crazy. You know how it is. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? We start to see these more dynamic power structures arise. And we see diminishment of psychological chunking when we start to discuss the life events, the little moments and unique experiences that can arise, that can emerge from an engagement in like a pedagogical um dialectic or dialogue even, right? um so it's identifying someone as like an oppressor, and like saying like, oh, oppressors can't be a part of the learning process, isn't like this like long sweeping move that like we might believe it is, with like the kinds of bureaucratic lockdowns that we see more often than not perpetrated. um it's just like fucking different, you know. It is different though. It is very different. But it's what the people want to hear. I mean, like, they don't know what they want to hear. They don't know how they want their life to be unwound. They just know that like they can blame like this one person, and then maybe eventually they'll learn. Um maybe eventually they'll learn. What do you call it? Oh, that there's more to life. I mean, that's what you want to see, right? One aspect of the reply is to be found in the distinction between systematic education, which can only be changed by political power, and educational projects, which should be carried out with the oppressed in the process of organizing them. The pedagogy of the oppressed, as a humanist and libertarian pedagogy, has two distinct stages. In the first, the oppressed unveil the world of oppression, and through the praxis commit themselves to its transformation. In the second stage, which is the reality of oppression, in which the reality of oppression has already been transformed, this pedagogy ceases to belong to the oppressed and becomes a pedagogy of all people in the process of permanent liberation. In both stages, it is always through action in depth that the culture of domination is culturally confronted. Okay. In the first stage, this confrontation occurs through the change in the way the oppressed perceive the world of oppression. In the second stage, through the expulsion of the myths created and developed in the old order, which like specters haunt the new structure emerging from the revolutionary transformation. This is the hardest part here. Some would say it's not a viable means of enacting social change. The expulsion of myths created and developed in the old order is so heavily co-opted and studied in its totality by companies who are solely entitled to intervene in that for each individual on such a level that it affects like each individual like granularly with like a unique ID, kind of puts this out of reach, and is probably just one of a few ways that I find this text will arise as dated. Now, dated but not useless, obviously, because it's like, well, if people were browsing the internet responsibly, and people had proper protections from companies that want to release addictive web technologies and social medias or whatever, um, and people like still manage to find each other, then it wouldn't be such a problem, but that's not happening. It's not happening, but we need the same kind of group action. We're more impotent than ever, but the same type of group action is required by us. Um, what a fuck up. What a major fuck up. I mean, but that's the whole point of having like this fast moving technology sector. It's completely unregulated, so people will just try to like destroy each other's free will like this. Um I think it's a long-term goal, but it's no longer the second stage. I think change the way the oppressed perceive the world of oppression is obviously step 1. Um and now we have to like give people back themselves. So now it's like in the second stage, it's like you have to expel behaviors, like you're expelling like habits. It's things where the myth is as secularized as anything else that came after 1930. The myth is as secularized as anything else. It's the phone. You just do it because of the phone. It's for social participation. It's for personalized space. It's for voicing your opinion. That's what's being demonized here. Like the myth, to expel the myth itself would leave us in such a void that it would be completely untenable. You can't just rely on individuation to like organize people, even with like really driven people there. So it's like you almost like have to expel the behavior, which has a lot to do with step 1 also, doesn't it? Um people just constantly being set back. Yeah. Pressed veil and through the praxis commit themselves to its transformation. Oh, I suppose people are just gonna agree to praxis now. Sorry, praxis that doesn't come from my phone? Are you gonna pay me a big social media check for following praxis that doesn't come from my Google Assistant? Sorry, what? Yeah, it's tough. It's fucking tough. The idea is intact. It's just more bullshit to stop it from happening. Alright. We're communicating with dogs. My dog is like me, and I'm communicating with her. She wants to show the other dog. Alright. Jeez Louise. Sorry, my dog is she's so dancy right now. I got about an hour and a half of this left in me before I have to go cook dinner. And damn, I ate a lot last night because, like, for the first time today, I'm actually starting to feel hungry. All I've had is this Arizona. I've been completely full since last night. That thing was like a beach volleyball. God damn, I feasted. On my birthday, nonetheless. I didn't drink, though. I didn't drink or smoke. Oh, I smoked a little, but I didn't drink. Did not drink. And I didn't smoke good either. A lot of attachments clouding my mind. But I mean, that's probably fine, cuz I'm getting out there more and I'm like seeing people and stuff. Okay. What are we talking about? Yeah, there are limits to this. But I mean, let's continue forward because it's like anything that we see that's ever addressed the text in modern society is only going to convolute this. All right, dude, this dog is like bugging me, man. The pedagogy of the first stage must deal with the problem of the oppressed consciousness and oppressor consciousness, the problem of men and women who oppress and men and women who suffer oppression. It must take into account their behavior, their view of the world, their ethics. A particular problem is the duality of the oppressed. They are contradictory, divided beings, shaped by and existing in a concrete situation of oppression and violence. Any situation in which A objectively exploits B or hinders his and her pursuit of self affirmation as a responsible person is one of oppression. Such a situation in itself constitutes violence, even when sweetened by false generosity, because it interferes with the individual's ontological and historical vocation to be more fully human. With the establishment of a relationship of oppression, violence has already begun. Never in Violence has already begun. Never in history has violence been initiated by the oppressed. How could they be the initiators if they themselves are the result of violence? How could they be the sponsors of something whose objective inauguration called forth their existence as oppressed? There would be no oppressed had there been no prior situation of violence to establish their subjugation. Look, if you're gonna show up and fail test 1, which is literally advocate for yourself, you're not gonna have a good time. It's right there in the book. Oh my god. I'm not surprised that Bell Hooks mentions this, because that is, man, that's so badass. That's so authoritarian and badass. That's so cool. That's cool. That is cool. He knows. He's like Sherlock Holmes. He's like Sherlock Holmes. He's like Ace Attorney. He's like Harvey Birdman. He's like Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. He already knows. He already knows. No, but it's that decision to know that stops the panic. Stops the panic. If you're learning about something and you feel like everything else in your life is like nagging at you, ontologically some change is necessitated, right? If you're going to like go forward with like a calm like sort of state of mind, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do, especially electronically and at such a massive scale that it fucks with college enrollment rates. But like on a smaller scale where like trust is already established between this person and surrounding parties, and they can like, I don't know, learn English long enough to like ask for water or something. I like got me reaching here. No, I like it. I like how he just knows. Just draws the line right there. What a good skill to know where to draw the line. Violence is initiated by those who oppress, who exploit, who fail to recognize others as persons, not by those who are oppressed, exploited, and unrecognized. It is not the unloved who initiate disaffection, but those who cannot love because they love only themselves. It is not the helpless subject to terror who initiate terror, but the violent who with their power create the concrete situation which begets the rejects of life. It is not the tyrannized who initiate despotism, but the tyrants. It is not the despised who initiate hatred, but those who despise. It is not those who humanity is denied them who negate humankind, but those who denied that humanity, thus negating their own as well. And we move from state to state flawlessly, ideally. Force is used not by those who become weak under the preponderance. Force is used not by those who become weak under the preponderance of the strong, but the strong who have emasculated them. For the oppressors, however, it is always the oppressed, whom they obviously never call the oppressed. but demanding on whether they are fellow countrymen or not, those people, or the blind and envious masses, or savages, or natives, or subversives, who are disaffected, who are violent, barbaric, wicked, or ferocious when they react to the violence of their oppressors. Reaction, action, reaction. Yet it is paradoxical, though it may seem, precisely in the response of the oppressed to the violence of their oppressors, that a gesture of love may be found, that some distillation of the truth may be found. You know what happens to you on some level. How could this be fixed in a way that everyone can agree upon, given that they are allowed to agree? Consciously or unconsciously, the act of rebellion by the oppressed, an act which is always or nearly always as violent as the initial violence of the oppressors, can initiate love. Did I say repressed? Because I meant oppressed. Whereas the violence of the oppressors prevents the oppressed from being fully human. The response of the latter to this violence is grounded in the desire to pursue the right to be human. As the oppressors dehumanize each other, as the oppressors dehumanize others and violate their rights, they themselves also become dehumanized. As the oppressed fight to be human, take away the oppressor's power to dominate and suppress, they restore to the oppressors the humanity they had lost in the exercise of oppression. That's quite mechanical and satisfying. Yes. Yes. It is satisfying, therefore it is mechanical. It is scientific and satisfying, therefore it is mechanical. Therefore, I am wrong. Alright, Okay, okay. Okay, okay. Sorry, just... Okay. Cool. 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 Yet it is paradoxical, though it may seem, precisely in the response, blah blah blah, oh blah blah blah, identification, and they call it love, and they call this identification love. Whereas the violence of the oppressors prevents the oppressed from being fully human, the response of the latter to this violence is grounded in the desire to pursue the right to be human. As the oppressors dehumanize others and violate their rights, they themselves also become dehumanized. Oh, we just read that. Okay. Cheeseburger. I'm trying to think. It's fine. I'm just gonna fry something. It's literally gonna take 20 minutes. It is only the oppressed who, by freeing themselves, can free their oppressors. The latter, as an oppressive class, can free neither others nor themselves. It is therefore essential that the oppressed wage the struggle to resolve the contradiction in which they are caught. And the contradiction will be resolved by the appearance of the new man, neither oppressor nor oppressed, but man in the process of liberation. If the goal of the oppressed is to... Did they really just put a whole ass man there? If the goal of the oppressed is to become fully human, then they must be playing soccer. They will not achieve their goal by merely reversing the terms of the contradiction by simply changing roles. What if they were a new man? Damn, you're right, because men are made at work, and women are made into nothing. I like these terms. These are amicable terms. What's that? Women don't work, so they're basically unprogrammed and useless to the machine. That's awesome. Hey, women, let's all be more useless. Um, no, it's really amicable though, because like the economic the socioeconomic conditions of this is the reverse of this, right? So they're trying to like they're doing all these things for women to like reverse like the socioeconomic order or whatever. Um at least on some scale, so that oppressors can be put at the bottom oppressing themselves like we've been begging for so long. Um that's not what happened. The wrong people got their hands on it instead, because these people are not oppressed. Instead, people completely severed from the history heard about the entitlement and acted on it, not understanding the consequences intimately. Uh-oh. These loveless creatures ruining my life. Ruining my life. Okay. It is only the oppressed who, by freeing themselves, can free their oppressors. The goal of the oppressed is to become fully human. They will not, by reversing the terms of contradictions. Yeah, because it just unleashes the violence on someone else, isn't it? This may seem simplistic. It is not. Resolution of the oppressor-oppressed contradiction indeed implies the disappearance of the oppressors as a dominant class. However, the restraint imposed by the former oppressed on their oppressors, so that the latter cannot resume their former oppression, position, do not constitute oppression. An act is oppressive only when it prevents people from being more fully human. Accordingly, these necessary restraints do not in themselves signify that yesterday's oppressed have become today's oppressors. Acts which prevent the restoration of the oppressive regime cannot be compared with those which create and maintain it. Cannot be compared with those by which a few men and women deny the majority their right to be human. However, the moment the new regime hardens into a dominating bureaucracy, the humanist dimension of the struggle is lost, and it is no longer possible to speak of liberation. Hence, our insistence that the authentic solution of the oppressor-oppressed contradiction does not lie in a mere reversal of the position in moving from one pole to the other, nor does it lie in the replacement of the former oppressors with ones who continue to subjugate the oppressed, all in the name of their liberation. And now he's bringing bureaucracy into it. Well, clearly because he's anti-statist and he read a ton of Kierkegaard or something. I like, geez Louise, that's a whole lot to think about. I mean, like, what I wanted to say earlier was that he already identified a pretty impressively difficult task, which is think of something original. no one knows how to be original. There's very little that's original in this life. People copy and create derivatives of things constantly, and it keeps people on track. Um, or at least it should. It has in the past. Um, but the past is then, and this is now, and so now we have to understand that despite this history, which was imposed on people in the first place, we must push forward. So I'm gonna suppose that this history was invented, right? That's kind of like how Paulo approaches this. Is like he tries to introduce a process to this idea of coming up with like um new ideas about power and like how it's used, about rules and regulation and demanding like accountability for these rules. um that's like on the movement end of this. That's what moves people. That's what gets the product moving, and in the end people are always going to be like left out. They're always going to be subjected to some kind of like substandard way of living, as long as like all this communication is like so delayed and centralized to like some kind of movement, right? So the ideal is to centralize the movement to where it's necessary to concentrate the results of that movement, to totally change um the government through revolution in such a way that old forms of power cannot be invoked in like long-term schemes to usurp people who otherwise believe in like the consistent functional society that they spend time building. um and so like yeah, no, it's just like fucking crazy, like um because you're talking about like something beautiful, like I just like imagine like life and like abundance as being these like intertwined concepts, like aesthetically in my mind. Like it's just this like wonderful like colorful party, um where things move around, where the topic isn't always here. What's important isn't always here. Sometimes it's over there, and then we're moving, right? Like um that's very fun. A very very interesting idea. um that I think people can very intuitively hook into, which is why these ideas like presented in this like utopistic sort of way um are very well known and easy to distribute as like credible knowledge, because you're talking about something that like people can understand. um but I mean, like, in the midst of talking about like how these ideas can be understandable, we end up inevitably reproducing the disparity that we exist in now, in the midst of like relating conflict of the future with conflict as it exists now. um Safe to assume that in a truly revolutionized like government, like in the process of the movement becoming praxis and praxis becoming life, that the content of conflict, um except in its most like fatalistic outcomes, um is entirely is defined entirely differently, defined entirely differently, by a mode of living that supports people to live and doesn't try to like make examples of people to like prevent bad behavior, even though those examples are selectively distributed to various individuals, and the people in these examples are often extremely potent people who would much rather spend their time talking past these issues. It's real anti-intellectual stuff happening out there. It's kind of ridiculous. um But I see what he's getting at. I mean, you're talking about like distributing wealth in like a way, or distributing what, let's just call it wealth in like a way that like makes sense. And so at some point someone has to commit to the action. And so in the time that it takes them to commit to the action, the action itself can become irrational and subject to some sort of like correction, which I think is very possible with today's technology, but is also just like a largely devolved and unattended uh field of inquiry. Because people don't do that. People people any sort of experimentation that's been done with any sort of like method of distributing things like this has been done under the context of like private ownership of land and like centralized distribution, and essentially like doing nothing to like disrupt the status quo. Um and so it's I see it. I see the future in this, and that's important. Because when he starts saying bureaucracy into a dominating bureaucracy, that can throw a wrench into things, because there's going to be a bureaucracy somehow. He's put it in quotes, which I think is very important to note that he doesn't seriously mean that. Um, and that's like the kind of mindset that you bring into every thought now, because the idea is that you're rationalizing your victory. You are putting yourself on a path forward that allows you to think that you may win if you commit to your plan of action, which is what you're doing in the first place when you're like listening to like these myths or misinformation. Um, but you might notice that it really gets your motivation going. It gets you thinking and remembering things more easily. And maybe maybe just traversing these like little mistakes and misnomers between each person is a much more viable way of collecting some kind of consensus, but we've yet to see that go unexploited in the past 50 years. But this is good. You're rationalizing victory, and you're using that to commit to what you're doing in that moment. And this is where like performing rote habit, like really making the abstract and ephemeral process of forming knowledge, creating long-term memory, solidifying that into a mindset and action, that a praxis, if you will, that rewards you for continuing to go further on this journey through knowledge and the unknown. Uh, Hopefully, so that you come out the other side as someone who's willing to teach it, right? To bring someone else to this level with you, right? Um, that's what we want to see. That'd be cool. Be nice. I mean, there'd be problems with misinformation, but there are problems with misinformation now, and in this system, people are scrutinizing this information as soon as they run into it, so it should correct itself, right? Something good should happen. But even when the contradiction is resolved authentically by a new situation established by the liberated laborers, the former oppressors do not feel liberated. On the contrary, they genuinely consider themselves to be oppressed, conditioned by the experience of oppressing others. Any situation other than their former seems to them like oppression. This happened with my great great grandpa when he went from being a duke to some random Jewish guy in New York. He started beating his family. Um, But we can have conversations about these kinds of things now. It's different now. Formerly, they could eat, dress, wear shoes, be educated, travel, and hear Beethoven, while millions did not eat, had no clothes or shoes, neither studied nor traveled, much less listened to Beethoven. Any restriction on this way of life in the name of the rights of the community appears to the former oppressors as a profound violation of their individual rights. And this, my friends, is a path to victory that I feel haunted by. These are people genuinely trying to kill me, who face just so little scrutiny from the powers that be. These are people trying to kill me. It's ridiculous. Nothing's ever the same after someone makes an attempt on your life. Although they had no respect for the millions who suffered and died of hunger, pain, sorrow, and despair. For the oppressors, human beings refers only to themselves. Other people are things. For the oppressors, there exists only one right, the right to live in peace. Over against the right, not always even recognized, but simply conceded, of the oppressed to survival. And they make this concession only because the existence of the oppressed is necessary to their own existence. This behavior, this way of understanding the world and people, which necessarily makes the oppressors resist the installation of a new regime, is explained by their experience as a dominant class. Once a situation of violence and oppression has been established, it engenders an entire way of life and behavior for those caught up in it, oppressors and oppressed alike. Both are submerged in this situation, and both bear the marks of oppression. Analysis of existential situations of oppression reveals that their inception lay in an act of violence initiated by those with power. This violence, as a process, is perpetuated from generation to generation of oppressors, who become its heirs and are shaped in its climate. This climate creates in the oppressor a strongly possessive consciousness. Oh, baby. And if I don't see it every day on YouTube, possessive of the world and of men and women, apart from direct, concrete, material possession of the world and of people, the oppressor consciousness could not understand itself, could not even exist. Fromm said of this consciousness that without such possession, it would lose contact with the world. The the oppressor consciousness tends to transform everything surrounding it into an object of its domination. The earth, property, production, and creations of people themselves, time, everything is reduced to the status of objects at its disposal. In their unrestrained eagerness to possess, the oppressors develop the conviction that it is possible for them to transform everything into objects of their purchasing power. Hence, their strictly materialistic concept of existence. Money is the measure of all things, and profit the primary goal. For the oppressors, what is worthwhile is to have more, always more, even at the cost of the oppressed having less or having nothing. For them, to be is to have, and to be the class of the haves. And its consequences. As beneficiaries of a situation of oppression, the oppressors cannot perceive that if having is a condition of being, it is a necessary condition for all men and women and men. Woo! This is why their generosity is false. Incels, rise up. Gamers, problem drinkers, problem gamblers, rise up. Potheads, incels, alcoholics, severe depressive disorders, people, um, people, people with good leadership skills, but not a lot of volition to exercise them. Just rise up, rise up, rise up. Sorry, I'm just. I my incels have destroyed my mind. They've completely recontextualized this passage before I have even laid eyes on it. Incels. Incels have changed everything. Everything for me. I can't read this without thinking of incels, dude. That is hilarious. That is, man, that is. I can't read this without thinking of incels. No, I know. I know. It was feminist at the time. But now feminism is done. We have a bunch of rich women. So now it has to be about incels. Because it has to be about, say it, Susan, hegemony. No, like, for real though, all these luxury traps and shit, it's kind of crazy how someone can just be so far thrown off their grind. It makes me sympathetic. And I mean, like, to be honest though, like, the one true grind is in, like, to survive, right? That's the drive. The drive is to survive. And then you know, you decorate it, you make it what it is or whatever, you learn, but it is the frustration with the inability to sustain one's way of life that is felt universally, and not without good reason. um Frankly, I wish it was easy to just be like, give people what they're complaining about not having, please. But it's just, how do you get the message out? How do you get people to communicate? How do you get the right person to hear what you're saying before the wrong person hears what you're saying and fucks it up? It is always a problem of communication, and any problem of communication can be seen as a problem with pedagogy if people are failing to recognize, like, economic crises at the rate that they do today. Like, the fact that people can say two things and think they mean the same thing, and then take whatever political will that possesses them and direct that towards the one candidate who is going to make life better for neither of them, is a huge fucking issue today. And you know what? If incels gotta rise up, incels are gonna have to rise up, because I'd rather have people asking all the time. I'd rather have people asking all the time, period. If people could just voice what they want constantly without catching a bunch of shit for it, that'd be nice. That'd be, like, really convenient for, like, anyone who's not a Fortune 500 company right now. So you can actually see what the fuck people want. But no, it's more important to demonize the behavior. Apparently, asking and not having. Well, every woman knows what that is. That's a child. And what do we do with child? Put it in the dumpster. Okay. Sounds awful. Sounds awful, man. Sounds awful. But it's more deeply ingrained and reinscribed than you would believe, to the point where the finite actions of life being describable or even remotely rationalized as this patriarchal subversion of one's free will is man, that's a problem in and of itself. Especially when women could just be asking women for the kind of advocacy and power that they desire, the kind of change that they want in their life. They want someone to buy them a nice lunch. They want someone to buy them a bag. Ask a woman who makes money. Why's it gotta be gay? Why does it have to be a relationship thing? Why do these things have to be relegated to these roles in society that have been arbitrarily defined by you to perpetuate your own class struggle? Because everyone's going to have a different idea about what it means. Just find a rich woman and ask her for things until she gives it to you. Jesus. But no, that's not cool or fun. So just it gets nipped at the bud at the development level. The algorithm never shows people these things. The algorithm, or what is it? The public account makes a bunch of public relations numbers up by feeding into its own fucking machine understanding of itself, and saying things like, well, people like a positive message. People like they don't like these terms. They like these words. Women don't like having nothing to give, so they'd rather give nothing. And this is cool. It's like, Jesus, dude. Go bother a rich woman, please. Love to see it. I bother people all the time. I just be asking for shit constantly. I'm out there. Okay? I go out there and I ask with my words, okay? And I make it obvious that I'm gonna ask. Alright? And is it worth it every time? Yeah. Because every once in a while, you get a little fish in a basket and you gotta be like, oh, you know what? I don't actually need this. Do you want it back? And then they say no because they're just like, no, I gave this to you. Just use it another time. And you go, yes, this is the truth of life. Thank you. And you know, you do that for others. But if no one's asking, then it's not going to happen. People aren't going to learn that. All right. The oppressors do not receive their monopoly on having more as a privilege, which dehumanizes themselves, others and themselves. They cannot see that in the egoistic pursuit of having as a possessing class, they suffocate in their own possessions and no longer are. They merely have. For them, having more is an inalienable right, a right they acquired through their own effort with their courage to take risks. If others do not have more, it is because they are incompetent and lazy, and worst of all, is their unjustifiable ingratitude towards the generous gestures of the dominant class. Precisely because they are ungrateful and envious, the oppressed are regarded as potential enemies. who must be watched because they're saying that in totality their individual unwillingness to budge on these material issues represents nothing in in terms of these large scale societal projects that demand taxation or donations to enact. If there's no taxes to give you tax credit from, no one's going to donate. And if you're going to say that taxation is theft and then say that this is what you do for society, then you're not doing anything for society in your own ideal world. Like, it brought to full motion and brought fully into this world, realized as you request with minute adjustments made, it will be the same thing but way worse and with way more genocide. It's offensive. It's really offensive. But you have to think of this from their perspective. If they don't do the right thing, then they live in the chaos that is the human sensory trap. Once humans become aware of their senses and aware that they can affect their senses, their ability to trust what is around them has received a considerable psychic blow. This is something a lot of people go through, but is it fair to just let people flounder around in a cultureless, lighthouseless sea of chaos and nothing? No, and enough people already believe that's clearly not the problem either. It's really that there's this total separation between upper class culture and lower class culture, and a definite, tangible monetary divide, a monetary difference in what people will do knowing something is for rich people or not for rich people. So, it really is just a fucking posse, a team and a half of people really just trying to, like, ruin anyone's chances at, like, surviving another generation. Oh, but, a few of them are stupid. So, stupid, redeemable. It's, like, very, very close here. No, and you have to give up a lot of pride to, like, really, like, sit back and, like, see, like, your life kind of, like, torn bit to bit from, like, the very foundation of our inspection of things. And there's a lot to be said about that, but I mean, the thing about it is, it's like none of this is ever going to be obvious or, like, cool. So the first thing that someone is going to say to this person that you haven't met yet is that they are stupid for feeling different. So that it's so convenient to call them stupid is, like, this sick trap set up to spread more division. Man, it's the most annoying, loud people you can imagine. Jesus. But yeah, until you start asking, nothing happens. Ungrateful and envious is just so, like, it's so dumb. But that's enough. It's enough for someone to, like, withhold everything and more. then it's fucking highway robbery. It could not be otherwise if the humanization of the oppressed signifies subversion, so also does their freedom. Hence a necessity. Sorry. It could not be otherwise. If the humanization of the oppressed signifies subversion, so also does their freedom. Hence the necessity for constant control. And the more the oppressors control the oppressed, the more they change into apparently inanimate things. This tendency of the oppressor consciously to inanimate everything and everyone it encounters in its eagerness to possess unquestionably corresponds with a tendency to sadism. Okay. We'll pick this up later. I need to cook dinner. But we'll pick this up later. Probably finish chapter 10. I don't know. Tonight after dinner. I'm gonna go AFK for a minute though. Alright, I made chicken wings. They're not here, sadly. They're in the oven. Waiting for my mom to get home with some sauce so I can have some sweet, sweet comeback sauce with some slaw and some chicken wings. Okay. Sorry. I'm gonna be right back just one more time. But after that, I'll be ready. Just gotta give me 2 minutes. That's not my AFK screen. Oh man, dude, I can't wait. I cannot wait. Cannot wait for mommy to be home with the sauce for my chicken wings. Ooh. Oh, gee willikers, I'm so excited. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, alright. Uh, dude, I'm hungry, bro. I am so hungry, bro. I am so hungry. I'm unreasonably hungry right now. I'm so hungry, dude. I'm so hungry. Okay. Let's push through. Let's do this. If it weren't for my incredible gluttony, I would not be in this situation. And yet I am. It's fine. It's really fine. This tendency of the oppressor, conscientious to an animate to inanimate everything and everyone it encounters, and its eagerness to possess unquestionably corresponds with the tendency to sadism. The pleasure is complete domination over another person or other animate creature. The pleasure in complete domination over another person is the very essence of the sadistic drive. Another way of formulating the same thought is to say that the aim of sadism is to transform a man into a thing, something animate into something inanimate. Since by complete and absolute control, The living loses one essential quality of life: freedom. Sadistic love. Sorry, there's like something in my fucking teeth. Sadistic love is a perverted love, a love of death, not of life. One of the characteristics of the oppressor consciousness and its necrophilic view of the world is thus sadism. Whoa. Whoa. And that's Eric Fromm on The Heart of Man. I think Eric Fromm is most widely known for his pioneering work on the idea of a identity crisis. Is identity crisis Eric Fromm? Am I crazy? Or am I thinking of someone else? I'm thinking of someone else. Who did Identity Crisis? Eric Erickson. Different Eric, but equally catchy name. I can't believe they killed Michael Brown 10 years ago. 12 years ago now today. That's crazy. That autopsy was salacious, bro. It just fucking further solidifies the inherent anarchy in this fascist bullshit. Yeah, just sick waste of life. As the oppressor consciousness, in order to dominate. Oh, hello. Hi. Do they have that? Yeah, comeback sauce, the slaw, and oh, what type of slaw? It's what's the second one? Daikon. The daikon slaw. Yeah. Yeah. And can you get French fries? Can you get like a little thing of Cajun fries or something? Seasoned fries? Seasoned fries, yeah. Whichever they have. Yeah. All right. Okay. Cool. Sounds like she has me in her purse. So I'm gonna hang up. Okay. As the oppressor consciousness, in order to dominate, tries to deter the drive to search, the restlessness, and the creative power which characterize life, it kills life. That's something you decide with yourself. That's a decision that you're making about this, Paulo Freire. Freire. That's a decision you're making about it, and goddamn, it sounds good. There's an intensity to life, where this idea that like self-expression is tantamount to constituting yourself as an object of history, but then also as like a human being in other people's eyes. I think saying that's life or death is like true. I've known this as a truth like my entire life. Like, if you can't be yourself, then people are negating your ability to access what is fully within reach. okay? If you're 4 years old and you've ever been in a preschool classroom, okay, and you go BB Baba over to the teacher and you say, "Teacher, can I play with this today?" Or, "Teacher, can you teach me this today?" And they say no, okay? That's killing someone. That's killing a very small person, okay? And that's how it feels, all right? You stop talking. You stop asking for things, okay? You stop believing that there is a way to ask for what you want when you go up to someone with the most innocent request ever and it gets denied. You ask a teacher to teach you and they say no, and it changes how you interact with the institution forever. It kills life. It's serious. It's that serious when you're that small. It will define you at 4 years old. And let me tell you, it's not very easy to file for that to be gone. It's really hard to file for like a positive experience to be associated with that. First of all, I have to go through my insurance, and those people always try to fucking kill me. And second of all, you gotta find someone who's like down to give you like EMDR or like some other form of like re-experiencing therapy for something that you can hardly describe yourself. That's ridiculous. That's asking for way too much, and your claim will be denied every time. Your claim to reality will be denied every time. You will be so far off track with your therapist that you will feel like you are wasting your money talking to yourself. Do that ahead of time. Find the right person, because that is not it. I'm sorry, just my stomach. Sorry, my stomach. It's like, yeah, it kills life. Yeah. No, it really does. It really does. It defines an entire life. It takes every person you could have be. It takes every person you could be and asks them to die before they are alive. It asks them to lay down their life and to apply that emotional intensity towards being anyone besides the person that you just rejected. It kills life. More and more, the oppressors are using science and technology as unquestionably powerful instruments for their purpose, the maintenance of the oppressive order through manipulation and repression in the classroom, even. The oppressed as objects, as things, have no purposes except those their oppressors prescribe for them. Given the preceding context, another issue of indubitable importance arises: the fact that certain members of the oppressor class join the oppressed in their struggle. Let's move on to that later. I want to spend maybe just like a moment more with this, and then call it a stream. Damn, that's crazy. Yeah, I think the fact that we want people to decompartmentalize, to move away from these needlessly neurotic, authoritarian structures that create a life for them that gives them so much less than it has to offer is just it's terrible. It's not good. Maybe it should be criminal. Yeah, this can encroach on someone at any stage in their life, and just absolutely quell an innocent heart. There's something so beautiful for the restlessness, for the creative power, as he calls it, that characterizes life, that search for meaning, that to end it so definitively is painful, to say the least. All right, I'm gonna go. I'm hungry. I think I hear my mom here, which means the sauce is here, which means I get food with sauce. I'm